What's up YouTube? This is Rybo at the Bench, and today I have another head-to-head knife video. Today comparing the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight with the Spyderco FRN Chaparral. To me, these knives are a lot closer than people think. This is, I think, between $90 and $100, at least when I bought it. This is between $80 and $90, at least when I bought it. So aside from a big Spyderco price change, they're roughly equivalent in price. And also in size. And yes, the Para 3 is a much bigger knife than the FRN Chaparral. However, the cutting edge is very, very similar. They both have, in terms of sharpened edge, a very, very similar cutting edge. The Para 3 is a little bit longer, a little bit wider blade, definitely a longer and thicker handle. However, I think that they are very, very similar. So let's get into it. Here are the categories for the head-to-head videos. So we have pocket clip, scales, overall size, which is like height, weight, how does it carry in the pocket, thickness, etc. Ergonomics, the action detent, which is a very subjective category, just like which one's more enjoyable to open every day when you need a knife. The blade, size, how well of a slicer is it, that kind of thing. Or, I'm sorry, how well does it slice? Steel, which is the better steel. The lock system, this is a compression lock, this is a back lock. And the intangibles, which is just, which one am I reaching for when I need a knife? So let's go ahead and get a baseline in terms of the measurements. So let's do some weight. On the FRN Chaparral, you were looking at 2.1 ounces. On the Para 3 Lightweight, you're looking at 2.5. So a little less than half an ounce difference, which is not surprising considering they are both lightweight knives and the Para 3 is a little bit bigger. So let's do sharpened edge measurements. So sharpened edge, we're looking at right about right under 2.4 inches. And we are looking at right about 2.6 on the Para 3. So that's a very important measurement. Para 3 is a little bit bigger, but roughly the same in terms of sharpened length or sharpened blade. In the pocket is another good measurement. So if we were to take a measurement of kind of top to bottom here, so this is harder than it looks on camera. We're looking at 4.27 inches versus a much smaller 3.63. And then let's look at the thickness here. So I believe we have like about 1/3 of an inch versus a fairly substantially larger, about 1/2 an inch. Yeah. All right, so that gives you an idea. That pretty much just tells you what you already knew by looking at both of these, which is that the Para 3 is a bigger knife, right? It's bigger in every way. Sharpen length, the handle, the thickness, the weight, etc. However, I think that they're still, it's a good comparison. So here we go. Let's do pocket clip as number 1. So both of these have the wire pocket clip, which is my favorite pocket clip on any knife. However, I'm going to give a clear advantage to the Para 3 for 2 main reasons. So, number 1, Para 3 pocket clip, if you look at it right here, you can see no wire coming out of the bottom, right? So it fits very flush in there, slides in and out very easily. I don't know if it's just my Chaparral, but it came bent, both sides. The other side's a little bit more, but it did come bent. And it doesn't fully seat into those 2 slots right there. So that's kind of one ding against this. Maybe it happens here. Maybe this is just a defect that I got, but that's one thing. But really the biggest thing is this carries so much deeper. If you look at these, this almost completely disappears in the pocket. This has this little horn sticking out. So to me, the deeper a knife carries, the better, the more likely I am to carry it. I really like a deep carry on a pocket knife. And so that's a clear advantage to the Para 3 in my opinion. All right, scales. So 2 different scales on here. So on the Para 3, you have the classic bidirectional texturing. Nothing really special about it. And on the Chaparral, you have this honeycomb pattern, which I think is really cool. It's very different. You don't really see this on many things. And so this one's a very tough one for me to make a pick. On the one hand, the Chaparral is, I think, the honeycomb pattern is made for this knife. And the reason I say that is because it's super grippy. I mean, you feel it in the hand, any direction you push. While you're holding the knife and your hands are up against here, you really feel it. It's a rough texture, and you know that you're on it, right? This one disappears a little bit more in a traditional hold like this. Like, I don't really feel the texturing on the knife. But when I really do feel the texturing on this is when I'm pulling it up out of the pocket, because I'm pulling up against that and it's kind of biting into the hand, or when I'm really pushing hard on here for some reason. I'm, I don't know, prying something or pushing on something. When I really need the texture on this one, I feel it. And this one, because it's a smaller and thinner knife, just has a little bit rougher texture, which I think makes sense considering the size of the knife. However, I think the bidirectional texturing is it's a classic, it's very proven, and it's more comfortable for long-term use. So I am going to give the advantage here, although there's absolutely nothing wrong either way. This is a really cool pattern. I think Spyderco should probably do it more, but this has kind of stood the test of time. I find it more comfortable and more practical, just functional, even though I really like the look of this better than that. So slight advantage there goes to the Para 3. Overall size, so like I said, these are two different size knives, right? The Para 3 is bigger, but this category is really which makes a better use of the size. And on this one, I'll give an advantage to the Chaparral. I mean, the Chaparral is the efficient knife. That's what kind of everyone calls it. It is the biggest blade you can get in the smallest package. You have no wasted space here anyway. If you've ever taken one of these apart, you know that it is kind of hard to get back together because there's just not a lot of wiggle room for different stuff. I mean, everything is just really tightened down there. You can see where the blade comes in. It's just right at the tip. There's really no wasted space. You have a very broad blade, and you're hiding a lot of that pretty much up to those, up to the back lock right here. Whereas on the Para 3, you have something very similar to the Delica, where you have all this wasted space out here. You have a much thicker housing. Just overall, it's just much thicker, and you have just a lot more space in there. You can see kind of where that knife ends. It's like halfway there. And so you just have a lot of white space back here, a lot of empty space. And so I think overall size, this one disappears in the pocket. It makes a very efficient use of the space. This one does not. And I mean, I think the benefits are in the category we're about to talk about, but in terms of just size alone for the blade length that you're getting, the Chaparral is the clear winner to me. All right, ergonomics. So this is where I think the Para 3 makes up for the size, because ergonomically this is just one of my most comfortable knives to use in the long term. You can see that really, really large handle. I can get all 4 fingers comfortably with room to spare. I have fairly large hands. It's got a nice finger choil here. It's got a nice finger choil up here with some jimping. Has some jimping back here, but it's not too aggressive, which I really like. It's just very fine lines cut there. So I really like that. On the Chaparral, it does have very nice kind of finger ergonomics, right? Like it falls very nicely in place here. But the difficulty with this knife is it's just so freaking thin. I mean, it's so thin that you don't have a ton to grab onto. And what's there is very nice, and they've done a good job. But it's noticeably very thin, and you really feel that. Whereas this guy is going to be very comfortable to cut with. I mean, this feels almost like a kitchen knife to me. So I think ergonomics, definite winner is the Para 3. Action detent. So, which one's kind of more enjoyable to open? This is a very subjective category, but if you're a knife nerd, you spend a great amount of time opening and closing your knife. Just when you grab it, a knife that is more enjoyable to open, easier to open, is something that is gonna make you return to that knife a lot more often. So this is a back lock, this is a compression lock, and so that means that you have to disengage by pushing this button here, and that basically the only way to open this, and especially this one, and I'll talk about this in just a little bit, is to do this kind of one-handed finger open, which is very nice. Spyderco makes that process really nice, and they've kind of they've made that their own, I think. And then this is a compression lock, so essentially kind of a liner lock just on the back, but it's actually got some added benefits. It's a much stronger lock than a liner lock. And so this one just falls shut. So this to me is no contest. This is a very fidgety knife. You can do the Spidey flick very easily. You can do a traditional flick like that. You can do the classic kind of Spyderco, just one-handed open. And then this just, and it's hard for me to demonstrate this, but this just falls shut and is just super smooth. You can use actually the back lock here, compress it, the compression lock, and open it that way. Just has a lot of different ways to open it. It's very fast deploying. It's very fun to just sit here and play with it, which I know should not be something that's considered in a real knife review. However, it is. I think this one opens a lot smoother, a lot easier. This one's a little bit tight, and so I'm gonna give the advantage here to the Para 3. All right, blade. So this one, like I said, very similar blades, a little bit different shape, but kind of classic Spyderco. You do have a thicker blade on the Para 3 for sure than you have on the Chaparral. And in fact, let me just, while I'm doing all these measurements, let me just go ahead and measure that. So on the Chaparral here, we're looking at 0.07 inches. Let me do that in millimeters. 1.8 millimeters. And here we're looking at 3.6. So you're looking at about double the thickness at the top of the blade. Both of them taper down very nicely. Both of them are great slicers. I mean, you know, you can't really go wrong. Like I said, this is pretty much a kitchen knife. This is just an awesome knife to use in the kitchen. I'm gonna give the advantage to the Chaparral for kind of two reasons. Number one, I think it's probably a little bit better slicer just because of the thinness of that blade stock. I mean, you can see this has a very nice grind to it, but this one is just so thin. I mean, it's let's see if I can get that. Yeah, there we go. Just super, super thin, really nice blade geometry there, nice flat grind. It's just kind of everything you need. There's really not a ton of stuff getting in the way. This one, you know, very similar. However, the thicker blade stock just, it's not quite as good a slicer, although it's pretty close. So very slight advantage here. I also think that, you know, this has this big hump that comes out of here. It makes for a much wider blade. It does give you something in terms of ergonomics that this one doesn't quite have. Doesn't feel quite as natural, but I also think that it makes this a much more efficient blade. You're getting kind of just what you need in a smaller package, and you don't have this added bulk that's kind of out here. And where that really shows is in the pocket. I mean, if this had a little bit less of a hump here, it wouldn't be such a large knife in the pocket when you compare it to something like this. Right, so you're adding a lot of thickness here that doesn't necessarily have to be there, although I do understand it from an ergonomic standpoint. All right, steel. So this has the CTS BD1N, and this has CTS XHP. To be honest, they're both fantastic. I'm gonna give the advantage here to the Chaparral. I think on paper this is a better steel. I have had some issues with rusting on this, not super bad, but just I have noticed some rust spots from time to time. Usually just, you know, my typical oil knocks that off, no problem. Something you want to keep an eye on. But this has had a razor sharp edge. It's held it for a pretty long time, and usually I just have to strop it or hit it on a very hard stone to kind of bring that back. This one has held an edge very well as well, but it's a little bit newer steel. It's kind of unproven. So far, I've had really good results with it, but I see people calling this more of a VG10 killer than anything else. And so I think on paper, the XHP is probably the better steel. So that's what I'm going to go with. All right, lock system. So this has a compression lock, like I said, falls shut very nicely. This has a back lock, and it does not fall shut very nicely at all. Probably my frustration of this knife beyond anything else. However, it's very strong. So, you know, this knife could be a lot lighter if it didn't have this big chunk of steel back here, like the Delica does. The Delica has FRN back here. This has metal back here, and I think it adds some weight. However, it does give you a very satisfying back lock, a very strong back lock. And so the lock is very, very strong here. However, the compression lock is a very interesting lock that Spyderco has, and essentially what it is it's this frame lock, but it has this piece of metal that goes up here and it engages in a slot in the blade. And so you really have kind of all around strength on this, and it's hard to explain without taking it apart. Maybe I'll do a video on that in the future. But I think you have a very, very strong lock here. I don't know between the two of these which would be the strongest lock. I think this one would. I'm not positive. But I guess in terms of what I perceive as potential failure scenarios or why a lock may break or just get dirty and gum up, this one seems to be a little bit, I don't know, it seems to be a little bit more, I think it'll age a little bit better. It's certainly more satisfying to open. It definitely feels very strong. Honestly, they're both very strong, but I think the compression lock just has that cool factor, and so I'm going to give the advantage there, although, you know, they're both great locks. All right, intangibles. Clearly it doesn't matter. I think the Para 3 is the winner, but you know, which knife am I reaching for when I'm looking for a knife to carry? I thought it was this one. I really did. I carried this for quite a while. It's a fantastic knife, but I don't know. There's a couple things about this knife that have started to turn me off a little bit. One is just the back lock. Backlocks are great. I really like them, but this one is so stiff that it's not really a joy to use. I'm mashing down on the backlock right here, and this blade is not disengaging at all. I have to actually push it shut, and so it's very tight. It's just, you know, it's just not super enjoyable to open and close to me. So that's kind of one thing. And the second thing is just it's very, very thin, which is a good thing if you're looking for a reduction of weight. And there are certainly times when this is definitely my choice for a carry knife, because I need something that's very lightweight and that carries, you know, fairly deeply. However, if I'm just looking for a knife to carry around, this has actually been in my pocket a lot more than I expected. When I first got it, I thought it was going to be a lot bigger, or I thought it was a lot bigger than what I had. And so I thought that it wouldn't really be a daily carry option for me because it was so big. However, this has found its way into the pocket most days, to be honest. I mean, it's so enjoyable to cut with. The compression lock is so fun. It's very fidgety. You know, it's just an all-around fantastic knife. It's super comfortable. It carries really deep in the pocket, which I think is why it surprised me so much. For being such a large knife, it carries really, really nicely in the pocket. And so, you know, I have really, really enjoyed this knife. And so for me, the intangibles, it's going to go to the Para 3 lightweight on this one. Honestly, it looks like the Para 3 just absolutely killed the Chaparral. Chaparral is still a really fantastic knife. I recommend both of these. I will not be selling either of these anytime soon. But I think in this category, all around, for me at least, this is the more enjoyable knife between the two. So hopefully this has been enjoyable, and I will see you next time.